Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires. This video is an examination of Clan Baali, clan of infernalists, diabolists, creatures most foul. If Baali were to dress like this in the final nights, he would undoubtedly meet final death pretty swiftly, but that is alright, because they do not dress in red and black. They do not have horns, they do not have tails, they do not have pitchforks. If rumours can be believed, the Baali are skilled manipulators, more so even than the Toreador or the Nosferatu. They use the masquerade. They use mortals and immortals both, not just vampires, but apparently their fingers are embedded so deeply into the crust of the earth that they are in contact with powers beyond our ken. They can communicate with them, and they can summon them to lay waste to civilization if they so choose. Here's a big question then, if they can do that, why haven't they? In a time when the Baali barely exist, if they exist at all, and I will get on to that, why do they not bring forth the great demons that nestle beneath the earth, and exert some of that power that they supposedly have? Because they don't. They don't have it. The Baali do not exist. Here is my opinion. The Baali are boogeymen. They are rumours. They are nightmares. They are the kinds of things that make neonates sleep with the light on. The reason is, elders tell neonates. I had a friend once, very powerful vampire. He made a deal with a vampire that came to the city. No one knew him, but this vampire offered him great power, more than even a Setite would, in exchange for simple favours. The following night in Elysium, my friend spontaneously combusted, and as he did so, we heard his soul shriek out that it was being dragged to hell. The man he'd made a deal with, the vampire in the corner, chuckled as he realised that the deliverance was at hand. Now, this is all apocryphal, it's all rumour, it's all legend and myth. That is all the Baali are. If they existed at all, they do not exist in these final nights. The elders tell these tales not to protect their neonates, but because they don't want their neonates pulling at the leash. They want their neonates quite happily nestled between their legs, where they can be used and abused, because whether you're in the Camarilla, the Sabbat, or the Anarchs, hell, even in the Tal Mahafrihe, True Black Hand, elders use neonates. It's a fact of unlife. And they will make up any old shit in order to get it done. If Stories of Devil Worshippers does that, well, all the better. But let's entertain the notion that the Baali did exist at some point, and that they were founded by an antediluvian who stumbled across the tribe of first men, and when they stumbled across the tribe of first men, he found that they were committing great acts of human sacrifice. They had constructed a well of limbs, of bones, of torsos, of offal. This antediluvian, for a reason that has never been explained, fell into a great rage and tore through the tribe of first men, rending them limb from limb, casting these body parts into this well, this ritual canticle. There were 3 that were cast into the well by the antediluvian, who somehow rose out of it as vampires. Whether the antediluvian dripped his own blood in there during the conflict, or perhaps they came about through some other means, the antediluvian was gone by the time the 3 Methuselahs awoke. One was Nergal, one was Moloch, one was another. Who was the antediluvian? Was he Cappadocius? After all, the city in which this well apparently was Ashur, and Cappadocius has repeatedly been referred to as Ashur in texts, but then again so has Sorlot, clan founder of Clan Salubri. Hakim is another likely candidate for being based around that area at the time, or so the legends say. The truth is, so many rumours abound about which antediluvian founded the clan or bloodline. And let me make this clear. The Baali are not a clan. They are runoff. They are the runt of the 13 clans because they are the 14th. They are discharge. If they are anything, They are the trickle of blood that the antediluvian forgot to lick off of his lip after biting it to embrace someone more worthy of the embrace. And these three little mortals, these three abominations, lapped at those drips like disgusting little puppies that should have been put out to slaughter. Somehow they claimed unlife. Somehow they claimed they were a clan. And Nergal was an egregious vampire, an outlandish vampire, a vampire who wanted to bring about the end of the world, essentially. And I know, it's a trope, and that's because the Baali don't exist. Nergal supposedly had communicated with beings of the outer darkness on occasion. He believed that, as indeed members of the first tribe believed, that there were creatures that before God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, lived in the darkness that existed before the light. And Nergal wanted to talk to those primordial creatures. He found one, Namtaru, and through great acts of human sacrifice, again constructing these foul, diabolical wells, he not only did that, but he also raised a great plague. He became known as Nergal the Sickness, for he spread the Black Death, he spread cholera, he spread typhoid, every disease known to man from his bowel spread across the Middle East, across Europe, what was Europe then. In order to raise this Namtaru, this creature of the outer darkness, whose true name he did not know, but he thought that great act of sacrifice would bring Namtaru about. Whether Namtaru appeared or not cannot be said, for the Sombra Crusaders, before even Christianity was on the cards, they were followers of Ereshkigal, an ancient deity. They brought their blades to bear, sanctified bastards that they are, and brought low Nergal, not just with swords, of course. The La Sombra had powers back then that they do not now. They supposedly conjured a great tidal wave of abyssal darkness that washed Nergal and his few remaining followers that had not succumbed to the disease, because, after all, Nergal, in his idiocy, supposedly surrounded himself with a vast cult who wanted to bring about the heralds of the end of the world that would lift them up, but by doing so they would have to sacrifice themselves. So Nergal left himself with very few living followers, which left it very easy for the La Sombra to wash him off the face of the earth and send him to wherever the abyssal tidal wave came from as it drained down the plug hole of the world. That isn't the end of Nergal, of course. Nergal supposedly reappeared as Shaitan or Satan, and Satan has reappeared time and time again across history, either as a mortal or as an immortal. Definitely not always Nergal, but the first time that Shaitan appeared, supposedly as Nergal, he claimed that he had spoken to the outer darkness face to face, or as much as you can do with outer darkness, and that he had great powers now, and he would spread disease, and that he would bring about the end of the world so that he would be stood atop of it when it was rebuilt. Great lofty ambitions. Moloch was a more, introspective vampire, a more calm, passive vampire, definitely not kinder, definitely not more in touch with his humanity. He advocated that his child are almost all embraced from members of the first tribe, acted in secrecy, kept their actions cloaked, because he could quite happily see what was going on to all of Nergal's followers that were going around sacrificing humans. They were being hunted down and sacrificed themselves, because hunting people and killing them does not generally adhere you to the local populace. Moloch was all about subtlety, and that worked for a time. Moloch was a very powerful, very intelligent vampire, just as gifted in constructing these diabolical wells of limbs, torsos and the like as Nergal and his followers had been. But Moloch did things in a much more discreet fashion. He got himself into bed with other very powerful Cainites and other beings. He did not want to make himself a one-man army like Nergal had. Rather, Moloch eventually fell in with Carthage. Why did he do this? Well, as an abject lesson, it could be said. Moloch was very much aware that the beast was right. that they were predators, that Baali and vampires all are predators, and it's the humanity that is the facade. It is the beast that is pure. That did not mean that Moloch wanted to become a ravenous animal. Rather, he wanted to become the ultimate sin. He wanted to become that which lies within, the ultimate evil, original sin. But he could not do that alone. He would need to convince others of his way of thinking, and so he got himself into bed with the Bruja of Carthage, with Troil himself, and supposedly not only constructed these wells, these bacchanalian sacrifices that took place in Carthage in order to win them wars, he eventually persuaded Troil to only feed from the blood of other vampires. Eventually Troil was embracing humans just to feed from them. And then he was dragging Troil along to the acts of child sacrifice that Moloch was perpetrating, and Troil never raised a finger to stop, because Troil was brought along just to show that he had no flicker of humanity left. That could have been the end of the tale. They could have made a great army. The Bruja, the Baali, and the Assamites in existence in Carthage, they could have made a great army, completely lacking in humanity. But then Rome came, the Ventru, the La Sombra, the Salubri, and so on. The Baali were quite pleased with this in general. They felt, well, great, we've proved that the Bruja, the Assamites, that your ethics, your morals mean nothing when you are offered great power in exchange, because that is what Carthage was. And so the Baali were packing their bags ready to leave when they noticed that Moloch was fighting alongside Troil against the Romans. That their great master had succumbed to that most base of human emotions. Love. Okay, not love. A blood bond. Moloch and Troil had time and time again exchanged blood over the course of centuries. This resulted in such a firm blood bond that when the Ventru armies stormed the walls of Carthage, they were fighting side by side, Moloch and Troil, and when they fell, they were holding one another. They sunk into the ground in an embrace, and when the victors salted the earth and cast upon it various rituals to prevent any of the vampires of Carthage from ever rising again, Moloch was down there in the arms of Troil. This was a great blow to the Baali, as you can imagine. Of course, this was not the last great act of the Baali. The Baali also, well, put the curse on the clan Assamites. You are probably familiar with the curse that the Tremere levied on them, but no. The Assamites had ritually diablerized their enemies for time immemorial. It was one of Hakim's edicts. But it wasn't a necessity. They did it because it was part of their ritual. The Baali were often succumbing to this. They shared much of the same ground in the Middle East, and against the might of Assamite diablery from a distance, essentially, and the increasingly lowering generations of Assamites as a result, the Baali needed a new trick. Using foul blood sorceries, they managed to capture an elder Assamite among with humans that they flayed to death over one of these wells of human offal. They concocted a great ritual wherein they sacrificed the Assamite and cursed the blood of all Assamites to make them addicted to vampire blood, to crave vampire blood, just as Troil had craved vampire blood. So the Assamites now fell on their allies within the Ventru, within the La Sombra, within the Zemisi, whoever. They fell on those who were on their side. If the Assamites had continued their war against the Baali, the Assamites and the Salubri on their side would have surely been victorious. The Baali would have been eradicated. No more diabolists among the Canaanites. But all of a sudden, the Assamites were attacking Malkavians, Gangrel, Nosferatu. They had no choice. They were addicted to the blood. And so their former allies fell on them. The Baali were given a reprieve. But their ranks were decimated by this point, and this was the time of the Dark Ages, of course. The Baali, a shadow of their former self, if indeed they had ever existed at all. Because you could remove the Baali from the equation in almost all of the apocryphal tales that surround them, and they still hold true. Troil may well have ordered great acts of human sacrifice in Carthage in order to bolster the reserves of vitae flowing through the streets for his Bruja Childer. It's quite possible. And likewise the Assamites, who knows what their curse was before they were blood addicted, but they maintain that the Baali put that on them. Sounds to me like the Bruja and the Assamites want someone to blame other than themselves. They want to say, we would never have indulged in these vile acts if the Baali hadn't made us do it. But if the Baali did exist, then they were just facilitators. They did not necessarily push them down the road, they just showed them the road. They said, there is great power down that road, and you can walk down it at a cost, and it seems that the Bruja and the Assamites often agreed that that cost was well worth it. Still, there are few clans as reviled as the Baali, perhaps for their methods of embrace. Certainly sometimes they will embrace a human in the normal way. Sometimes they will convert a vampire of another clan to clan Baali, although that is rarer. The most odd ways of embrace that apparently are synonymous with clan Baali are through the brood mothers. Some of their vampires house bugs, it can be best be said, I suppose, parasites, that will erupt from the skin of one of the Baali and essentially devour the blood of the prey and fill the body with this brood, this insectoid brood. One thing to also note is supposedly not all of these wells of bodies are static. There is one on the Dark Magister, a ship that supposedly prowls the Mediterranean. The hull is completely filled with corpses, with offal, and it is said that when this ship captures people, like pirates, they will throw them down into the hull after filling a human heart with Baali blood. If the human can drink that heart of Baali blood, he will rise again as a powerful Baali. The Baali are not named after Baal, the ancient Mesopotamian or Babylonian god. Baal means Lord. So when you hear Baal Zebub, it means Lord of the Flies, because that's what Zebub means, of the flies. And the Baali, very accustomed to never using their true names, will only refer to themselves as the Baali because it just means lords. Bear that in mind. If the Baali existed, they exist because they are the progeny of one particular antediluvian, which means they are the same clan as another one of the 13 clans. This means that their true name could be Ventru, it could be Setite, it could be Bruja, but for as long as no other vampire has power over them by knowing which clan they belong to, they are just the lords, they are just the Baal, the Baali. This gives them power of a sort, if you believe in that kind of thing, which in these nights doesn't mean much. So in these final nights, what can be said for the Baali? Well, certainly some still cling to Nergal's dreams of absolute destruction of the world in order to bring something down in its place. Summon the creatures from the outer darkness so that they can thank you and make you their champions. That is one idea that the Baali sometimes cling to. Others cling to the ideals of Moloch, and that is to highlight the corruption, highlight the beast, highlight the sin, make the vampire love the sin and the sinner, instead of constantly refraining from indulging one's basic nature. Other Baali are far more, circumspect, I suppose. There are, after all, childer of the third Methuselah of the Baali, and who knows what they're doing. But still, like I said, this is all myth. There are no Baali. The Baali are boogeymen. They do not exist in the final nights. And if they did, they are so fractured. They have no clan structure. There are certainly no elder Baali around. Least of all in the upper echelons of the true Black Hand. Thank you very much for watching.